Kickstart this session. I'll just spotlight myself for everyone for the sake of the recording. Okay, welcome to this session. It's session number 6 from today's Sustainable Ecological Engineering and Design for Society, better known as Seeds. For the online version of today's session, or this session, is titled Sustainability, Ethics and Responsibility. Okay, the first presenter, who I think couldn't make it here today, is Yvonne's, titled Towards a Sustainable Post-COVID-19 Higher Education Era in Zimbabwe, the Compatibility of Online Teaching and Learning Platform with Courses in the Built Environment. So unfortunately, we didn't receive anything from Yvonne's today. So we will skip that and we will proceed towards the following presentation by Peter, titled A Modified Delphi Approach to Assist Smaller Local Authorities with Self-Diagnosis of Barriers and Solutions to Net Zero Governance and Decision Making. Let me get that video from Peter.
My name is Peter Gudde and I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Suffolk. Before I start my presentation, I would like to thank the organisers of the Seeds Conference 2023, my supervisory team, for their support and guidance, along with those that participated in the research. What I'm presenting today forms part of a wider doctoral research programme exploring local authority decision-making and governance in a climate emergency. For further information, please get in touch with me. Local government forms a key component of the UK's political democracy, delivering accountable services to society. In the context of tackling climate change, local government is identified in the UK Net Zero strategy as playing a central role in delivery at local level. And notable progress is being made by principally metropolitan areas, where local authorities have been able to establish innovative and ambitious approaches utilising their scale and unified leadership. But these high-profile examples hide what has been described as the reality facing local leaders, that being a landscape with the lack of a nationally coherent plan, insufficient powers and capacity to act. There are 317 local authorities in England operating in the two-tier structure across 21 counties, each with their own responsibilities and arrangements. Councils therefore need help so that they can work together and with stakeholders to meet the net zero challenge. However, in academic and publicly funded research, there is a general underrepresentation of non-metropolitan local authorities. To help local authorities overcome the barriers to net zero, we specifically wanted to develop a solutions-based diagnostic tool centred on the organisation that is simple and cheap to use. We took a mixed methods approach using the literature and insight gathered from our previous research involving interviews and surveys of practitioners to help us establish a robust understanding of the barriers and potential solutions. The study area we chose is the east of England, which in fact is the home of the University of Suffolk as well. This provided a good place to draw knowledge and test the tool, since two-tier local government predominates in the area, with 41 district councils and 5 county councils. The Delphi technique was selected as an appropriate way of framing the tool. This approach was developed in the 1950s by the RAND Corporation as a way of quickly establishing solutions to complex problems by deriving a stable set of expert opinions through a series of structured questionnaires designed to minimise the biases observed in other problem-solving methods. The Delphi method is iterative, where responses from each round are fed back to participants who are given opportunities to respond to the emerging data. This approach helps to overcome problems experienced with conventional pooled opinion gathering. It's seen as an efficient solution to gathering expert opinion where time and resources are limited, and it's in common use in academic research, with over 20,000 published papers and articles across research areas including health and IT. In climate-related research, there are over 5,000 papers using the Delphi method, principally focused on scenario planning. However, no studies have been found which use the Delphi method to explore tailored climate actions from the perspective of local public administration. The design of the Delphi was compared against the standard Delphi discussed by Shu and Sanford 2007. Some modifications were necessary given the conditions into which the process would need to be applied. These included global events, national net zero policy landscape and organisational factors typical of district and county councils. 2 surveys were developed looking at barriers and potential solutions. And the contents of surveys were based on literature, previous survey activity and interviews of 25 local authority practitioners from across the study geography. The Delphi process started with the recruitment drive, which derived 3 participating organisations. That's 2 county councils and 1 district council. Within each, we asked them to identify a convener to help the process. We worked with each convener to recruit a minimum of 10 staff to form a panel representing the net zero experience of the organisation. We prepared briefing materials to ensure that each panellist was comfortable with taking part. We then ran the Delphi, starting with the barrier survey, followed by the solution survey. Following each survey, the results were collated for each panel and fed back to them alongside narrative comments that each panellist had provided about why they had scored a specific question in the way that they did. All feedback was aggregated, anonymised and in places key redactions made to narrative comments so the individuals or parts of the organisation could not be identified by other panellists. After the survey process, the results of each panel were analysed and a report for each council prepared and shared with the convener. We also undertook interviews with each convener, as well as capturing any feedback provided by the panellists during the process. End to end, the process took around 3 months to the reporting stage, with another month to conclusion, run between November 2022 and Easter 2023. The whole process was done online using standard Microsoft Office software, except for analysis of the narrative where we used NVivo. Turning to the surveys, we identified a core set of publications from which a list of 40 key barriers and 30 potential solutions was drawn up following themes. A Likert scale from 0 to 10 was then applied to each question. As well as the Likert scoring, each panellist was invited to provide their own words about how they scored. And if they felt that they couldn't answer a question, whether because it was outside their area of expertise or they did not understand the question, we asked panellists to score each statement 0. Different graphical approaches were considered to present the data. We finally settled on radar graphs and box and whisker charts. The radars allowed us to show the average strength of feeling of the panel as a group, while the box and whisker was used to show the spread of responses to a specific question. The results were presented after 1 round of reflection by the panellists. We evaluated both how the Delphi method performed and the results that it generated. Looking firstly at the method, comparison with Shu and Sanford suggests that the modified Delphi aligned well with the general Delphi characteristics, with some key observations of conformity and divergence. The key features were as follows. 3 panels with a total of 10 on each panel were recruited successfully. We saw a range of roles recruited across each organisation in line with the eligibility criteria. 26 of 31 panellists completed the full Delphi, giving an overall dropout rate or attrition rate of 13.3%. Over 85% of panellists felt quite or very confident completing the surveys, and we saw score changing at around 5.75% across the panellists for both surveys after round 1. All these parameters were generally considered within the parameters discussed in the literature. In fact, the score changing rate was considered quite low and to some extent validated the decision to undertake only 1 iteration. Compromises were made, which meant a partial alignment with the standard Delphi in the areas of expert panel identification and controlled feedback. Where the Delphi that we developed diverged from the standard Delphi was in the number of times that results were fed back to panellists for reflection and the way that group results were structured, although for the latter, Shu and Sanford do not identify any standard for group communication. The convener role is not identified in Delphi literature, although this may be a feature of the way that researchers describe their methodologies. We saw this as a key addition that made the process work much better than if it would have been run externally without someone within the organisation with knowledge, contacts and some level of agency and influence. Turning to the results of the Delphi process, the findings highlighted some consistency as well as differences across the panels. Each organisation identified a suite of solutions to improve their delivery. All three panels prioritise solutions to address investment funding and finance, embedding net zero, and improving the role and contribution of politicians. Two organisations identified as key solution improving the democratic decision-making process, while one also selected solutions to increase the local capacity and capability to deliver net zero. Across the three panels, the highest priority solutions were financial, in particular, establishing multi-year investment budgets for council net zero projects and establishing a finance mechanism for scaling up retrofit across all types of housing, followed by solutions to embed net zero by making the impacts of net zero, both financial and non-financial, more transparent across all council decisions. To conclude, we consider that the modified Delphi that we've described here has strength in the mixed methods approach, its robust background evidence, using both literature and practitioner insight. And with improvement, it can be made simple to use by organisations themselves. The evidence shows that there is a clear need for easy to use problem solving and consensus building tools where administrative structures, lack of resources and diverse geographies make it harder for smaller local authorities to address net zero delivery. Using this type of approach more widely would allow more insight to be gained from the local level across organisations quickly and at little cost to those organisations, possibly as part of a wired diagnostic or maturity assessment package. And this is the area for our next research. The results of the Delphi also reflect our wider call for more research and support for non-metropolitan public administrations to avoid creating a two-speed local net zero delivery landscape in the UK.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was really, really interesting, a fascinating study. Virtual lab, well presented, well researched. It's really interesting because it is similar to something that we are doing here in Leeds, and it's interesting because at the very start. So before I open the floor for any questions, I will just start by asking a few questions on my own. So it's interesting because when you started, you eliminated the issue of communication and how communication is essential among consuls, and it's something that also emerged as a theme in my study as well. The importance of communication, why public-client organizations are not really speaking to each other. However, we saw that this faded along the way as other more important findings emerged. So what's your justification about the insignificancy of the communication between consuls and not emerging as a significant factor in your research? That's number one. My second question is, have you considered any theories regarding the decision making and the influence of those barriers and solutions that you've identified on the decision making, and perhaps if there's a theory that could measure the decision making and you can assess this influence, it would be interesting to do so. Yeah, that's.
Well, thank you very much for those questions, and thank you to Saad. I mean, taking your point around communication. I mean, this is a part of an ongoing piece of research, and we are now looking at the relationship between local authorities in governance and how net zero delivery and their relationship of local authorities between each other and with their stakeholders is really important. So we felt at this stage to try and take a view more on the ways that they were working internally, rather than and how they were making their decisions internally, rather than how they were communicating with others, was an important point. That does actually play out into some of the solutions, though, where they need to work with other organisations. Therefore, in order for them to understand and be able to be articulating and taking their actions as an organisation, they need to be articulating those actions to others as well. So that point around communication is really important, but we didn't feel that we wanted to focus on that as a particular part of their process. So yeah, we recognise that as an issue. The second area around decision-making theory, that we're building on that in the next piece of research, which, as I mentioned, is looking at the relationships between organisations in order to improve the quality and the depth of delivery. Now, part of that research is looking at governance theory and trying to understand the principles by which governance and therefore decisions are made, both within and between organisations that may not sit within the same sector. So we recognise that local authorities play a key part around their democratic process and leadership, but they also need to interact with other parts of society in a much more effective way, which currently we're not seeing so much of, by virtue of them lacking potentially the capacity or skills or ways of working that could help. So you're right, we're probably less strong on the theory part in this. This is trying to find a solution that could be applied in a very pragmatic and practical way. What we're going to move into, though, is much more theorising, thinking around governance theory, but also looking at real world examples to see can we learn from the real world in a heuristic approach, trying to actually develop some sort of practical ways that people can work and help them move forward, but also cost effective. So that was one of the challenges that we set ourselves.
Well, that's a fascinating project. Well done. I'll open the floor for questions from the attendees. Anyone wants to ask Peter any question? Yes, Mohamed, please unmute yourself.
Peter, thank you for a great presentation and a very interesting research. I questions for you is with how you implemented the Delphi technique and the surveys for the different local councils and so on. You spoke about panels. So does that mean that you had more than one representative of different councils together and going through the surveys together? And if so, were there any issue perspective? Like, you know, did any ethics board give you any hard time on this? The second question, and you may have already answered that with like when you responded to Ali, but I'm just very curious, where are you going to be going from here? Like, so now that you've kind of inquired about, zero, barriers and solutions and so on, and it seems like this is an area of research that you've been working on for some time. So I'm just curious, where are you going to be going from there? Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for those questions. The first question around the panels, we set up 3 discrete panels, one per local authority area, or one per local authority. And we're working in an area where we have 2 tiers of local authorities. So we have a county council and a district council who have different responsibilities, but have to work together on net zero because there are compatibilities and areas of opportunities for sharing resource, for example. So we set up in each local authority 1 panel. Those panels operated it only for that local authority, and we didn't share any data between them as part of the process in order to get their own thoughts around their own organisation. That process could be improved if you have agreements between the organisations to be able to create take a series of sub-panels and create a multiple panel. We also set some criteria how we selected the people as well, in order to ensure as best as possible that they were both experienced in how their own organisation works around decisions and processes, but also around net zero projects. So we tried to ensure that they were familiar with the area that they were looking at to be treated as experts. So you're right. We produced reports for each local authority, and in fact, each local authority is asked to see the report of the other local authority. So there are questions that we addressed right at the beginning around anonymity to ensure that, because these organisations are small, you could trace, if you so chose, the individuals within the organisations and also the organisations themselves by the way that they talk about themselves. So we redacted certain comments around individuals or parts of organisations, and we also gave each panellist an ID number, so nobody knew who else was on the panel. That would avoid that influence of, is the chief exec on the panel, or is the senior team leader on the panel, and oh, that opinion is there, so I must follow their opinion or diverge from their opinion. So we try to maintain those ethics. Your second question around next steps. This is about the process I'm following for my PhD, and this is the third of 4 pieces of key research. We've looked at investment decision making. I've looked at barriers and solutions to delivery. We did some initial research from across sectors around net zero projects and how and what the challenges were being faced there, particularly around renewable energy. And the final piece is looking at developing models of governance that can then be applied in a similar process to this, to look at key criteria where existing governance mechanisms are weak and see if we can draw from those models of governance, and both using theory and real examples, some areas where we can improve the governance in those localities. So I'm just writing a paper at the moment, hopefully looking to get that published in the next few months, if I'm lucky. So that's the next stage for me.
That's brilliant, Peter. Mohamed, I think, do you have any follow-up on Peter's comments? No?
No, I just want to say thank you and best of luck. Very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so any other questions from the attendees? Anyway, Peter has provided his email, and for those watching the recording later, they can get in touch. So moving forward to the next presenter of this session, Oviemuno Otame. Oviemuno, are you? Yeah, I can see your name here with us today. Project titled An Evaluation of the Impact of Oil Exploration on Sustainable Development's Objectives for the communities within the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Okay, let us find your video. Okay. Sharing my screen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Oviemuno Otame, and I'm making this presentation on behalf of myself and my colleagues, Dr. Julius Kofi Akotia and Dr. Mihela Anka Kipala, all of the Department of Architecture, Computing, and Engineering in the University of East London. The title of our presentation is An Evaluation of the Impact of Oil Exploration on Sustainable Development Objectives for the communities within the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, and it is centered around the oil industry in the Niger Delta. Introduction. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, and it is the 10th world largest producer of crude oil. The country is widely regarded as a mono economy because of its over-reliance on crude oil, which accounts for over 80% of revenues, 90% of foreign exchange earnings, and 95% of national budget. Virtually all the oil production comes from the Niger Delta on the southern part of Nigeria. The region is made up of 9 out of the 36 states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and is home to around 40 million Nigerians. As a result of oil exploration, which has been ongoing for over 60 years, the region has suffered significant environmental and socio-economic challenges such as poverty, underdevelopment, environmental degradation, and inadequate infrastructures. To combat these challenges, the Nigerian government had at several instances created intervention agencies such as the Oil Mineral Producing Areas Development Commission, OMPADEC, and the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC. Our presentation today and conference paper will examine the impact of oil exploration in the region, the regulations governing the industry, some of the interventions that have been carried out, and their impacts and challenges in entrenching sustainable development for the people of the Niger Delta. Finally, some recommendations will be made on the way forward. So what are the causes of these challenges? First of all, in the Niger Delta, crude oil is produced from around 900 oil wells and transported through an elaborate network of pipelines totaling 7,000 kilometers with 123 gas flare sites for getting rid of unwanted associated natural gas that is produced in the course of oil extraction. Secondly, in the Niger Delta, oil spills are a regular occurrence and in some cases have even been accepted as a natural consequence of oil production. In fact, it is estimated that some 13 million barrels of crude oil have been spilled over 50 years, which is an equivalent of an Exxon Valdez spill or 260,000 barrels of spilled oil every year. The Exxon Valdez oil spill happened off the coast of Alaska in the USA in 1989. Lastly, 75% of produced associated gas, which equates to roughly 2.5 billion standard cubic feet of gas, are fled in the Niger Delta annually. And although this figure is gradually on the downward trend, it is interesting to note that Nigeria officially outlawed gas flaring in 1984, but the practice still persists because of regulatory deficiencies. Now, what are the impacts of oil exploration? The major impacts can be classified into economic, social, and environmental, although some of these are interlinked. The obvious economic impacts include unemployment, high rates of poverty, loss of livelihood, food insecurity, poor agro yields from degraded lands, and loss of biodiversity. While the social impacts are essentially reactions of people and societal manifestations of the environmental and economic devastations caused by oil exploration. And these include crime and insecurity, forced migration, conflicts, ill health, lack of access to essential facilities like water, education, and health, and generally poor infrastructures. On the environmental side, oil exploration leads to climate change through emission of the greenhouse gases, e.g. carbon dioxide and methane, acid rain, which is a mixture of carbon dioxide and rainwater that forms weak carbonic acid, air pollution from gas flaring, water contamination, and land or soil degradation from oil spills, coupled with noise pollution by the heavy machinery and high traffic volumes involved during oil exploration and production processes. The study adopted the quantitative research approach using a questionnaire survey as the main instrument for primary data collection. The approach was selected for faster data collection from a large segment of the study population using minimal efforts and costs. The questionnaire survey was administered randomly to the 3 key stakeholders in the Niger Delta, and these are the oil companies, the government, and the representatives of the Niger Delta oil producing communities. A total of 300 surveys were distributed with 262 retrieved, representing a response rate of 87%. In addition, secondary data from existing literature on oil exploration activities in the Niger Delta was also reviewed to complement the primary data. During the study, we wanted to find out the answers to 6 major questions. Question 1, what are the impacts of oil exploration on the people and environment of the Niger Delta and the sustainability challenges that exist in the Niger Delta? Question 2, what existing laws and regulations govern oil and gas exploration in the Niger Delta and how effective are they? Question 3, what interventions have the government and oil companies undertaken to ensure sustainable development in the Niger Delta and how effective are they? Question 4, what are the factors and drivers of sustainability policies and initiatives in the Niger Delta? Question 5, why do intervention programs fail and what are the barriers and constraints to sustainability in the Niger Delta? So what did we find out? We found out that poverty, health challenges, and environmental pollution caused by oil exploration are major concerns in the Niger Delta. That the general belief amongst the inhabitants of the Niger Delta is that current challenges would be non-existent or minimal without exploration activities. That even though there are regulations, existing regulatory frameworks are deemed inadequate and need updating and urgent review. That achievement of sustainability factors in the region is very low, and that government interventions fail due to poor implementation strategies, including project monitoring and evaluation, corruption and lack of transparency, mismanagement of funding, absence of community participation in project conception, design, and execution. In conclusion, we would say that oil exploration and production in the Niger Delta cause environmental, social, and economic challenges. That oil exploration activities have resulted in untold hardship to the people and the built environment of the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. That the major impacts are pollution caused by oil spillages, gas flaring, deterioration of buildings and civil structures, and decimation of sources of livelihoods, mainly agriculture and fishing. That the adverse effects of oil exploration far outweigh the positive developmental contributions in the region, hence the public outcry and agitations. And that numerous intervention strategies have been implemented in the area, but the impacts of these initiatives are minimal, resulting in the dismal state of underdevelopment that persists in the region. We also conclude that lack of monitoring and evaluation, together with funding, corruption, and improper implementation of interventionist programs, account for the failure of majority of these programs. That policy inconsistencies, discontinuity in government, and a general lack of political will are contributory factors to the Niger Delta crisis. Furthermore, although policies, laws, and regulations exist for governing how oil exploration in the region is carried out, majority of the respondents believe that these policies and regulations are currently insufficient and need to be reviewed and updated to reflect current realities. In the same vein, majority of respondents rated efforts by the government and oil companies' contribution to sustainable development as poor and indicated that they do not benefit from the intervention agencies' activities. Overall, we agree that intervention agencies and their schemes and projects, if well implemented, will create the much needed jobs and offer a tremendous way out of the youth unemployment situation that exists in the area. Thank you very much for your attention. We would kindly welcome any questions that you may want to ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this fascinating research. Well done. I'm really impressed, especially about the piece of information regarding the wasted 260,000 barrels, and with a simple calculation for how much is the barrel today, $84. So we are looking at 22 million wasted. Is it per year? Per year. $22 million wasted per year. So that's well, that's really a big number, and I'm sure this cost could be used elsewhere. So before I open the floor for questions, I'm really impressed about the response rate. So 87% response rate, 262 respondents. That's really impressive. And in my humble academic career, I haven't seen this high response rate. So that's my first question. Any suggestion to how you dealt with driving those individuals to actually respond? Because that's the most challenging part of our research, isn't it? To bring such a high response rate. That's number one. Number two, have you considered, because of the nature of those who you actually had as respondents, you had a really high quality of individuals responding. So didn't you consider having a qualitative expert assessment prior to making the quantitative study? So those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. Right. Question number one: to get that high response rate, what I did essentially was target group communities like in the companies and in schools, okay, within the region. And then you identified high quality people, individuals that you can just send this information to. Thanks to social media, it's very easy. The questionnaire was online. Okay, so all they need to do is just answer the questions. It's in the Likert scale format. They just press submit at the end. It was Microsoft Forms. Submit at the end, and I get the response immediately. So it wasn't like you needed too much effort to get the responses back.
Yep,
that's one. Then question two. Actually, my research it's mixed methods. Okay, but when this part of your conference came up, I was just doing the quantitative. So I just used the results from the quantitative to write the paper for this conference. Thank you.
Well, I need to congratulate you about your high response rate. It's really fascinating. I'll open the floor for questions. Yes, please unmute yourself and ask a question. Arisoko?
Yeah, hello, Otame. It's a very wonderful presentation, and I would first start with Ali to support how he got such response, because I happen to have firsthand experience in that area, like in the Niger Delta of Nigeria, and it's a really the points he highlighted are really areas of concern. So it's not a problem getting people to respond to such questionnaires, because we are all concerned about what's happening over there. And so I, for one, would not have an issue giving my opinion about it. So the subject is a sensitive and important matter, and getting as much responses is quite easy, because we all want that change. And so to our presenter, there are a number of areas that have been highlighted that we need to work on, and it's going to take it's a Herculean task to actually do this and get that impact, because it covers different and diverse areas. So my question here is, could you streamline, like, okay, in your opinion, for the future, what area would you start first, like a piece of it, to make a change? Because we can't really achieve a holistic impact or change now, because we are going to be looking at the companies exploring, the government policies, the local community. There are a lot of change that has to happen for us to make the significant impact. So I believe it's going to be best to like start from a small pace, just a chip off the block, make a change, and then gradually work our way towards a general change. So your opinion, where do you think would be the best point to start in making this change? Is it about sensitizing the community, creating awareness about sustainability? Is that something that could be done immediately to have an impact on this problem?
Well, thank you very much, Charity. You've already answered part of the question, which is that we have to sensitize the community, first of all, which is a form of empowerment. Okay, so there should be these public awareness campaigns that will be carried out, or that should be carried out in the region. Following from that, we also, the major concern right now, the immediate concern is to how we can lift people out of poverty and reduce the level of hunger that's in the region. And one of the ways we can do that is to implement a kind of social safety net. Okay, so make some kind of unemployment benefit payments to the people in the region, like what obtains here. If you're out of work, immediately the government takes over. So that will help in lifting people, a great number of the people out of poverty. Number two, it will be very helpful if we can diversify the economy away from oil. Okay, so the general thinking shouldn't be, the focus shouldn't be oil alone. We should start creating small-scale enterprises, okay, that in the areas of agriculture and manufacturing. This will create jobs and also help in reducing the unemployment in the region. Okay, and then government should actively participate in providing amenities. Okay, it's not going to just be word of mouth. They should start giving us clean water for drinking and domestic uses. They should start giving us educational facilities and increase efforts in the provision of healthcare facilities, and then build roads. Okay, I'm not sure if you're comfortable with the area. One of the problems we're having is roads right now. It's for a distance of maybe 20 kilometers, it could take you like 4 to 6 hours to get from point A to point B. So government should start implementing some of these infrastructural development to help in ameliorating the sufferings of the masses. Another way we will need to start, like you said, chip the block little by little, is to engage the communities. Okay, whenever we have any intervention program, we should, before we start any projects, we should engage these communities in the conception of these projects and the design and also the implementation to foster a sense of ownership. Okay, so it's a we kind of project, not them giving us projects. So that's one way we can go about it. Now, furthermore, on the companies, we need to not encourage, we need to start forcing them to implement, okay, environmentally friendly practices like they do here in the developed world. I don't know why we should have double standards. They should start implementing such standards as well in the Niger Delta. Okay, so they should reduce the pollution, they should stop the gas flaring if it's possible. By the way, gas flaring was outlawed in 1984. That's some 40 years ago, or almost 40 years ago. But up to this minute, they are still flaring. Why? Because the government and the oil companies, they collude, and that's what we call corruption. Okay, so they've not been able to actually put a stop to this practice. Again, the last one, maybe we should start with the current drive away from fossil fuels to renewables. We should start going towards that direction to develop a green economy. That to me will help also in solving this Niger Delta crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was quite explanatory and a good response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So any other questions? Okay, so let us proceed to the next presenter, Tharaki. Is Tharaki with us today? Tharaki, yeah. You can see. So Tharaki's project is titled Sustainability Literacy, Evaluating Instrument for Construction Professionals. Let me bring the video of Tharaki. Yeah. Sharing my screen. And we'll start.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the distinguished guests who are presented in this conference around the world. This study is basically about sustainability literacy evaluating instruments for construction professionals. Every sector and every community have been facing complicated issues due to decarbonization. Meanwhile, the impact caused by the construction industry is relatively high. Even though various researchers have brought innovative concepts into light, decarbonization has yet to be fully achieved, especially within the construction sector. The construction professionals' knowledge and awareness of sustainability significantly contribute towards accurate application of sustainability in construction. This fact has also been stressed by the United Nations as quality education was interpreted to a sustainable goal. Consequently, attaining adequate literacy is one of its targets. This study examines sustainability literacy evaluating instruments for construction professionals by considering its importance. The outcomes of this study would benefit in determining accurate evaluation, identification of gaps, progression assessments of decarbonization, and so on within the construction sector. As sustainability literacy is one of the main factors that accelerates decarbonization, examining the performances and scope of those measures become important in addressing the gaps of sustainability-related applications. Similarly, it is important as applicability of those instruments on construction professionals is quite lacking in the literature. In assessing previous literature, it is possible to view academics' attention particularly given to interpret literacy since the middle of the 20th century, and their work has already had an immediate impact on the current and future developments. However, it is important to define what literacy actually means to comprehend the scope of any study. According to the interpretations illustrated in this slide, literacy has been identified as a combination of reading, writing, and a set of activities that people engage in general. The conceptual framework of sustainability literacy has undergone a great deal of growth, and despite various explanations on sustainability literacy, Stipe has interpreted it as a set of skills that allow for active participation and control in social viewpoints. He highlighted this definition as the power to generate actions based on knowledge. When it comes to the concepts such as sustainability literacy and sustainability knowledge, measuring the degree of them is highly important to comprehend the level of understandings of individuals. Sustainability literacy measures have been advanced throughout the development of the sustainability concept, but however, this study utilizes its scope through the KAP model and SULI test instruments, as those are the most frequently consumed measures within the construction industry. In assessing the KAP survey model, it basically examines professionals' sustainability literacy levels by evaluating their knowledge, attitudes, and practice. This technique is widely used because it allows the researchers to explore discrepancies between knowledge and practice. It also enables gathering both types of qualitative and quantitative data, even though KAP approach is quite quantitative in general. SULI test contains a structure that assesses both local and global matters. The main aim of this test is to provide a globally recognized and geographically flexible frameworks for measuring and enhancing sustainability literacy. Although both of the above assessed instruments do not directly test decarbonization, it does include questions about sustainability-related themes such as renewable energy, greenhouse gas emissions, and carbon footprint. So therefore, these instruments could aid in identifying areas where education and awareness efforts can be concentrated to improve understanding of decarbonization and other important sustainability-related challenges. The study has adopted a systematic literature review method to attain its aim. Accordingly, Scopus and Google Scholar were the databases utilized for this research, especially because various studies argued that those databases are consisting of a variety of quality sources. This research has moreover followed the PRISMA protocol issued in 2020. The search initially considered all documents housed by the two databases between 2009 to 2023, and the search was initiated in April 2023. Once the relevant sources were identified, the data was extracted to a Microsoft Excel base that included data categories of the paper title, published year, source title, abstract, and keywords. In the next phase, the PRISMA flow diagram was incorporated to ensure the validity and the transparency of the methodology of this study. It displays the number of records found, those kept, and those discarded, along with the exclusions justifications. According to this process, 1,055 and 7 articles were retrieved from Scopus and Google Scholar respectively. The initial screening was a casual check which identified 975 records which were not important for the study, and the screening was the full text search for eligibility, where a further 76 articles were removed due to unrelated scope and false positives. Therefore, the analysis for this study included only 11 articles. In moving to the research findings, the study has revealed the environment of individuals as the first fact that impacts on sustainability literacy. However, the KAP model is consisted of inadequate consideration on the individual's environment and social perspectives of sustainability literacy as well. It also evaluated a limited perspective on the sphere of each individual's. Similarly, the SULI test is found to be an unsuccessful one in addressing a meaningful structure of knowledge, as its measuring qualities were not sufficiently investigated beforehand. Innovative perspectives of sustainability is the next factor identified in this study. Even though innovative perspectives of sustainability, such as integrational justice and the association between individuals and ecosystems adaptability are kind of essential to evaluate individuals' sustainability literacy levels. The KAP model had a less opportunity to examine new perspectives or to conduct an in-depth analysis on any particular theme because the survey contained a few open-ended questions. Various researchers have stressed the necessity of a coherent structure and the ability to conduct an in-depth analysis by a successful sustainability literacy measure. In assessing the bottom structure of the SULI test, it is found to be originally anticipating around 4 factors, but however, the exploratory factor analysis revealed that 11 factors are provided in the data. Further analyses have also shown a huge variation among factors in scree plot analysis. Similarly, the KAP model also discovered to be having an inadequate in-depth analysis in its underlying structure, and therefore the necessity of developing existing measures becomes highly significant. Institutional support such as policies, citizen engagement, and programs conducted by related institutions, also psychobehavioral interventions such as understanding of sustainability knowledge and pro-environmental behavior or pro-environmental attitude. Also managerial influence such as environmental concerns, environmentally sound behavior and decision making are also some of the factors that highly impacts on a person's sustainability literacy. However, as the existing measures have inadequately considered these perspectives, it is important to embed them to enhance the effectiveness and accuracy of sustainability literacy measures. In moving to the conclusion of the study, it's clear that the construction sector highly contributes on carbonization, and therefore establishment of sustainability concepts becomes very important. As sustainability literacy is one of the measures that indicates individuals' conceptual outlook towards sustainability, existence of a well-developed measure is required. This study has anticipated the KAP model and the SULI test and examined the effectiveness of those. The findings reveal that the environmental background, innovative perspectives of sustainability, and the degree of in-depth analysis or the coherent structure of sustainability knowledge, also institutional support, psychobehavioral intervention, and managerial influence should be taken count within the KAP model, SULI structures, or further measures which are meant to be developed to measure the sustainability literacy levels. However, this study basically relied on a longitudinal research method, and therefore other methodologies could be applied to reach the objectives in different perspectives. Similarly, this research has only considered the KAP model and SULI test, which are the highly used sustainability literacy evaluation methods in construction, and therefore other methods could also be taken count for future studies. So that's all simply about my research and research findings. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Tharaki. That was really interesting, and the study is really timely. So I have one question regarding. Yeah, so before that question, really well done, because sometimes we see organizations and sometimes also in academia, they try to implement sustainable practices or strategies without actually assessing the literacy of their social systems. So they end up having unfavorable results. So my question regarding the methodology, and I was surprised that you found around 1,055 papers, previous research efforts, and you brought that number down to 11. So 1,044 articles were excluded. Now I noticed that of course, the Prisma includes how you excluded that. However, can you take us through the process of excluding those articles from 2009 till today? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, when in searching records in the Scopus and Google Scholar, we gathered 1,062 articles altogether. But these articles were not specialized on the present study objectives and aims, so therefore we had to narrow them down. First of all, the study considered the methodology of each research, because methodology is very, very important. And we have excluded 698 almost, as I remember, because those methodologies are not aligning with the present study methodology, because some of them are quite quantitative and some of them's methodology doesn't seems like reaching to the present study objectives likewise. And also we have excluded from the scope, which means the scope is not relevant to the present study, because this study is about sustainability literacy, and there were some studies like sustainability knowledge and sustainability education, but those are not clearly defining the definition of sustainability literacy, which we have chosen in this study. And also impact, which means in this study, we consider the impact towards the construction industry and or more specifically on construction professionals. So there were some studies which were not specified on those impact areas. So we had to reduce them down and narrow them to like 11.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Okay, thank you, Tharaki. I will open the floor for any questions from the attendees. Yes, Peter, please.
Hi, thank you. That's a really, really interesting both process, and I followed that process, and I know it's quite challenging sometimes to run through the quality assurance side of things. But I was also interested in the next stage. Clearly, there is an issue within the construction industry in terms of turning theory and design into practice and the performance gap. And part of the performance gap is probably related to understanding why an intervention, a design intervention, cannot be translated into good build quality, and how do we avoid that carryover of historical build techniques into making buildings, for example, more passive in terms of energy use and being lower embodied carbon. So how do you see what you've done thus far as a way of influencing the literacy of the construction sector?
Yeah, I think the problem here is that the sustainability literacy of professionals were actually not evaluated so far in the practically. That's the main problem. As Saad told, like we employ people to construction, but we are not sure about their sustainability performance and knowledge. So to overcome this study investigates how far these measures are accurate and how far these measures are applicable to the current world. And it says that there are 6 elements that we need to add to the existing measures. So when these elements were added into the existing measures, specifically education institutions, because education is the basic source of sustainability literacy. So starting from there, we can imply, like we can change the curriculums and add certain points to the curriculum design and make more knowledgeable professionals for the construction sector. And also we can adopt things like institutional supports, innovative perspectives, interactive learning, and those measures to the practical commencements within the educational institutions, because that's where basically mostly the construction professionals were born. And in the second hand, in the practical implementation in the construction industry, it's very important for the construction companies to consider those measures and adopt them so that they can ensure that their employees are well aware of sustainability, so that especially the high budget projects concerning sustainability could be handed over to them with pre-assurance. It also ensures the quality of the whole construction project. So meanwhile, in the construction industry, things like training the employees, testing their sustainability literacy before assigning them tasks, and conducting workshops, seminars, and certain programs to improve their literacy would be needful, I think.
Thank
you so much.
Do you want to follow on that?
May I ask one more question? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I totally agree with you about the approach and tackling upstream in terms of the education of those coming into the sector. I'm also interested in about the user and how we interface between the construction sector, who are hopefully building better quality buildings, putting in technologies to control the building, and then the user who has to take the building on. So how do you look at that interface between the literacy of the construction sector and the literacy of the occupant?
Yeah, that's a good question, I must say. I think the construction process doesn't end from completing the project. It continues to the phases like maintenance and facility management. So it is very necessary to establish the sustainability literacy of the professionals as well as the literacy of the users, because the consumption of buildings and infrastructure also contributes to environmental and other sustainability issues. So addressing your question, I think this sustainability literacy should not be limited to educating construction professionals. It should be a continuous process where the construction professionals will be transferring their knowledge to their co-workers, to their clients, and all the other stakeholders. In that way, these measures could be applied to the building users at the end as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Any other questions to Tharaki? Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tharaki. And we move on to the next presenter and the last presenter of this session, Mohamed, titled The Health and Safety Risks of Working During Heat Waves on Construction Sites in the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom. Let me just bring the video. Okay, and sharing my screen.
Hello everyone, my name is Mohamed Issa, and I'm a lecturer in the Department of Construction Management and Engineering at the University of Limerick. My paper is entitled The Health and Safety Risks of Working During Heat Waves on Construction Sites in the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, and I'm making this presentation on behalf of my co-authors, Rian Grango and Patrick Gallagher, who are both undergraduate students in the department and who completed this research as part of their final year projects, and Aaron O'Neill, who's a PhD student working under my supervision. In terms of outline, I'll start by giving a brief introduction to the topic. This is going to be followed by a short review of the literature, then a description of the methodology, results and discussion, and conclusions of this research. So when we look at extreme weather events, we find that there's been a lot of research conducted on the effects of extreme weather events such as snowfall and flooding on construction health and safety. Interestingly, there's limited research on the effects of heat waves on construction health and safety. Now, this limited research had suggested that the construction industry in countries such as Ireland and the UK is not set up to deal with rising temperatures due to these countries' mild climate. The aim of this pilot research is therefore to investigate the health and safety risks of working on a construction site during a heat wave. So what does the limited literature on the topic say? A review of the literature revealed that construction workers are more prone to heat-related diseases and heat stress as temperatures increase, that workers in the construction industry are 13 times more likely to experience the negative effects of heat than those in other industries, that construction companies do not have a clear approach to protect their workers from heat waves, and that there is limited legislation about working under hot weather. For example, the UK Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations of 1992 do not specify a maximum temperature for working outdoors. They only mandate that the temperature should be at least 13 degrees Celsius if the task involves intense physical activity. So to collect data for this research, we conducted semi-structured interviews with several experts in the field. As part of these interviews, we asked these experts to complete a failure mode and effects analysis, or FMEA. So what is FMEA? Well, FMEA is a process that involves experts analyzing components of a system to identify potential failure modes in that system, as well as their causes and effects using a standardized spreadsheet. So for this research, we asked these experts to identify, based on their experience in the field, the health and safety risks of working on construction sites during heat waves. We also asked them to assign numerical ratings on a scale from 1 to 10 to the severity of each risk, its likelihood of occurrence, and the ability to detect it. We then multiplied those three ratings to produce what we called a risk priority number, or RPN, for each risk. And that RPN basically measured the importance of the risk. The higher the number, the more important the risk. The experts were also asked to identify the causes and effects of each risk and to recommend solutions to mitigate them. And of course, these methods were approved by the University of Limerick School of Engineering Review Ethics Committee prior to their use. So we interviewed 5 experts in Ireland and the UK to fill out the FMEA spreadsheet and answer other related questions. These experts were selected based on several factors, such as their educational background and their experience working on construction sites under hot weather. They ranged from managing directors to site managers. For example, interviewee 1 was a site manager in the UK who had experience working on a site in the UK where temperatures reached 40 degrees Celsius in the summer of 2022. 2 of the 5 interviews were in person and 3 were online, with each interview lasting between 30 and 45 minutes. Each interviewee was asked a total of 15 questions. The questions centered on 5 main themes. 1 is the health and safety risks of working on construction sites during heat waves. 2 is potential solutions to mitigate these risks. 3 is barriers to the implementation of these solutions. 4 is preparedness of the construction industry and of construction companies to protect their workers during heat waves. And 5 is relevant legislation. So what did the results show? Shown here on the screen is the part of the FMEA spreadsheet that shows the 5 most important health and safety risks identified. So basically those were the risks with the highest RPNs, risk priority numbers. So what are these risks? These risks were heat stroke, sunburn, dehydration, impaired decision making, and increased heart rate. And what was interesting about those risks was that we were seeing risks with serious health impacts, such as heat stroke and dehydration, included next to trivial risks such as minor sunburn. And this is because, if you recall, the importance or RPN of these risks is based on their probability of occurrence, their ease of detection, and the severity of their effects. Therefore, even though the effects of a minor sunburn are minimal in comparison to those of heat strokes or dehydration, their probability of occurrence is much higher, thus their comparable RPNs. And again, what those experts identified for each risk is their causes, their effects, and current design controls to mitigate them. And you can read more about those in the actual paper. With respect to solutions proposed, these solutions ranged from limiting or stopping work at peak temperatures to providing mechanical aids where possible, providing personal protective equipment, PPE, such as ultraviolet protection, providing suitable rest and welfare facilities, such as well-ventilated and air-conditioned areas, practicing crew rotation, and of course, one very important thing is to get management buy-in, as management sometimes did not notice the struggles of working under extreme conditions. And finally, avoiding employee complacency that can happen after relevant health and safety measures are implemented. We also inquired about potential barriers to implementing these solutions, and responses received included barriers such as poor leadership on site from top management, which would not help establish a robust, safe system of work. Workers sometimes would be reluctant to lose out on hourly pay if sites are closed due to heat. Moreover, companies may be reluctant to close due to the negative effects of such closure on project progress and cost. And according to one expert, actually, the construction industry is ill-prepared for the possibility of rising temperatures in the future. Decisions about taking time off to avoid extreme weather conditions are usually left to the site or project managers. There are also no training programs for working in hot weather. And finally, all interviewees stressed the need for a positive culture that would empower workers and encourage them to express their views when it came to implementing solutions. With respect to governing laws, all 5 experts agreed that there are not enough laws in Ireland and the UK about construction work under hot weather. In Ireland, there are mainly guidelines as opposed to legislation, and these guidelines are open to interpretation and can thus be exploited. Also, all experts agreed on the need for a law for maximum outdoor working temperature, similar to the law for maximum indoor working temperature in the Health and Safety at Work Act. In conclusion, again, based on the results of this research, the construction industry is not prepared for outdoor working in high temperatures. There's a lack of governing laws in the area. Solutions usually require a positive safety culture that relies on 2 important things. 1 is management buy-in, 2 is employee empowerment. One important limitation of this research is that only 5 experts were interviewed from across the UK and Ireland, so obviously we need larger scale studies with much larger samples to be able to generalize those findings. And we need over time or over the long term to develop a body of knowledge that can conceive solutions that would significantly decrease relevant or related risks. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mohamed, and your team. As always, fascinating research project. And as a person who worked in major construction projects in Dubai, honestly, I cannot emphasize enough how damaging can heat waves be on the health and safety of employees. So my question as you were proceeding was whether or not we can take those policies from high temperature countries like UAE and implement them here. However, I noticed that you already included that in one of your questions to the experts. So I will proceed forward directly to open the floor for questions from attendees, as I'm conscious of time. Is there any questions you want to ask to Mohamed? Anyone? Okay, brilliant. Oh, Peter, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, Mohamed. Thank you ever so much, and I don't want to hold up the session too long. I mean, really interesting piece of research, and the exposure of construction workers, relates also to other allied sectors as well. So are there other sectors where there's research been done that the knowledge and insight can be translated in terms of the mitigations?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? You were saying something about, whether the research. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. Can you repeat it?
That's fine. That's fine. I'm just wondering whether other sectors that are similarly exposed to extreme heat and have to work in physical activity, whether there's other research that translates well into the construction sector.
That's a great question. To be very honest with you, I'm not entirely sure. I think the construction industry is unique in that obviously it's outdoors, right? You're doing construction projects outdoors all the time. It's a dynamic work environment where, again, as a project progresses, your work environment around you changes. So it's not stagnant. It's not like, it's not stagnant. It's not a permanent work environment. It's always changing and it's dynamic. So I'd say those two are the two important characteristics. So if there's any other sectors and maybe may also have those two or two conditions, then definitely we may sectors. But we haven't really looked at other sectors, right? For this research, we're focused more mainly on construction.
Now, that's one more. There's a really good tie-up between Tharaki's paper, Mohamed's paper, and I apologise to the first speaker's papers around communication and literacy and understanding the implications of the exposures that we're talking about. Carbon literacy, the communication around carbon is important in all sectors. The communication around the impacts of oil spills and the impact on communities is really important, and the impact of not only heat exposure but sunlight exposure on, for example, skin cancer incidences is really important. So it's about how the receptor, the individual that is exposed to that, understands the implications of being exposed to those three things. So I think there's a great sort of crossover learning between all three. Maybe you never know how these sectors, how research goes, but I'd be really keen to see how it's more about the learning from maybe behavioural science and the practices of communication in order to be able to translate cause and effects and the impacts of effects through. That'd be really interesting to hear.
I agree, Peter. And now that you've mentioned, for example, oil exploration, I mean, I agree with you that something like oil exploration, for example, there may be a lot of knowledge generated that can be transferred, right? Right, because again, they work in under like dynamic and so on. So I think I agree. There's a lot of knowledge that can be translated from other similar sectors. That's a great point.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think we can safely say that session number 6 was successfully completed, and we can head to the networking room now, where we can do some networking for the next 10 minutes or so prior to commencing the last series of sessions, Early Career Researcher Spotlight. Sessions 8, 9, and 10 as parallel rooms as well. So I'm very happy that you are all enjoying this very interesting conference, and I'm very happy to see all of that efforts in research efforts and those wonderful projects and research topics, very timely, very much needed. So yep, that's the end of this session, and I hope you continue with us in this conference as we proceed further.
Thank you.
Thank you.